Well, here we are. Welcome to the Markcast. The XFL 2023 Rookie Draft is live. The Professor Andrew Murray and I had a conversation last week on the show, talking about off-season content the XFL could do here, building excitement. I think this would grade as it needs improvement. I think the Professor here for doing end of the year grades, but we have the full rookie draft here. I have John Vogel standing by, and I know Evan Willsmore is hopping on. We have Coach Craig Sports as well. John, it's finally here. 103. We made it. We did not. I saw one of the channels went live this morning, like at 8 a.m., which is crazy. But how are you doing?
Pretty good, man. And happy to be on this with you as always. I feel like it's been too long since I've got to see your beautiful face, but that's okay.
That's good. So we're standing by here. Like I said, Evan's going to hop on. We're going to get everyone else. But John and I like being first here, first to market with all this. List just came out. I'm still getting email notifications literally as we go on. What are you making of everything you're seeing so far? Just first blush, and then we'll kind of go team by team.
So I think I said it right before we went live. I was like, I was like, this guy, he's in the NFL, isn't he? And you're like, no, they all can't be. Oh. I don't know how some of these guys aren't in the NFL. I think that's kind of what popped at me first. And secondly, it looks like there wasn't a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? There wasn't a lot of consideration for the USFL because there's a few guys in there that got drafted by the USFL that the XFL went ahead and drafted too. So I think we got a quarterback in there that was drafted by the USFL. But a lot of these guys I got to see down at the Tropical Bowl, which I did see some XFL personnel there sporting their XFL T-shirts and stuff back in January. And so it's really good to see some of these guys getting onto teams, getting an opportunity to compete next year. I'm excited.
Yeah, so just to kind of run down here the rules of this, and I'm kind of scrolling the list here. If you're listening to this, I'll post the audio later. The rule is you had to have been 2023 NFL draft eligible, and you can't be under a team contract right now. Now, there's going to be another fall draft, right? If you were maybe someone that you wanted to do the showcase this summer, or you're still on and you got cut, or you weren't in the 2023 draft. So there will be an additional one coming up here later. This is just kind of the first blush of this. Craig standing by. I'll bring him on in just a second. John, do you like the idea of this draft? Of like, I watched Russ Giglio and Doug Whaley talk about this on the Neil Stratton, Inside the League agent call. And they said, we want to give these guys kind of direction for the summer here. Like if you're sitting there, you're not quite sure what's going on. Let's get you on here. We're expanding the rosters from 51 to 90. What do you make of just the concept of this rookie draft?
So first off, I like the concept. And it's because, if we compare it to the USFL draft that was this past, February, the problem with it was a lot of guys that weren't going to make any impact whatsoever on the league. It was a lot like the CFL draft where you draft a lot of guys for rights. So unless the USFL is going to do like what the CFL does, a neg list, there's no real point in having that draft, I think. And it's just really just a lot of spectacle, and it has no real impact on the league. Whereas this right here that we're looking at, I mean, this is going to have these are impact guys next year in the league. And I think that Doug's completely right when he says that these guys need a little bit of direction. A lot of DMs that I had just, on Twitter from different players in the last couple of weeks hitting me up, asking me details. Hey, do you know anything about this? What's going on? Because they're trying to make their plans. They're trying to figure out, do I continue trying to pursue this dream at this point? What are my options and what do I need to do to continue? And, this gives answers to 80 different guys, and I think that's commendable.
Yeah, so it was 10 rounds today. It started at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern, and then I've kind of been going back and forth, and okay, the list is coming, kind of all that stuff. Let's bring in Coach Craig here. I know Evan's getting stuff going as well here. Craig, what do you make of this today? I'm kind of scrolling the list here. We'll go back to the top, and then we'll go team by team.
Yeah, I was just seeing some of the names now. The guy at the top of the list is actually the one that was interesting to me in Cy Barnett, because I know he did sign with the Saints at one point in time. He must have got cut recently. He's a guy that I actually interviewed on my channel not too long ago. And then he's a really good guy, really interesting guy too. But I like the concept of this, obviously giving these guys a little bit extra chance. And some of these guys I'm surprised haven't even just signed on to like NFL contracts, just
like Chris Smith right
camp
here.
and stuff.
Chris Smith with San Antonio was a free agent addition to Seattle, so he must have already been cut. Because that's a guy that I had spotlighted in my fantasy rookie guide this year.
I
Yeah,
know Marvin Pierre is another one too that got cut recently by the Cardinals.
so it's good. I mean, this is interesting. Like I said, we kind of have some tangible off-season stuff here. Let's go through. I know Evan's getting his Roughneck stuff going here. Arlington Renegades starting out. We'll just go alphabetical here. Cy Barnett, Connor, DeHagar. I'm never going to get all these names. I mean,
Dagenhart, yeah.
Dagenhart, guy. John, why don't you start here? We'll kind of go play by play.
I know Connor a little bit. I got to know him obviously through quarterbacks. There were several quarterbacks that hit me up this year. Connor was one of them. Just trying to figure out what games they needed to go to, get through the process and stuff. And he's a strong-armed quarterback. Kind of reminds me. I'm not saying that he is him, so don't take. It reminds me same playing style of Justin Herbert. Where he's got the arm to throw, he's got some mobility. He's a big, tall guy. This is with the issues that Arlington had with being able to push the ball down the field, Connor is clearly, a guy that they're trying to get to bring in to answer those concerns. So I like that. I like that for them a lot. And I like that for Connor.
I had a question on here. Arlington went with the Corby. Christian's asking, Arlington went with the quarterback. Whether that means they don't think Perez is returning. Is this way too early to tell? What do you buy into that?
Oh yeah, no, it's way too early. And when we talk with some of these personnel guys, and we're asking them questions like, hey, what do you think about this guy? What do you think about that guy? Because we're doing some gauging. We're trying to get some guys, pushed onto some teams that may have been overlooked or things fell through when they were trying to get signed at post NFL draft. And pretty much the answers have all been pretty much the same, which is, hey, we don't even know who our coaches are going to be this year. So we can't even begin talking players, quarterback, scheme, any of that, because there's just too many variables at this point. So, when you have Arlington, who it looks like, I would say Coach Stoops is coming back for another year. You win a championship, you probably come back. Connor, I think that makes sense taking a quarterback. There's only two quarterbacks on this list, and they're both on teams that probably have coaches returning this year. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, currently, right, Rob Woodson, mutually departing ways. I saw Rod posted a couple things thanking the league and the players and stuff this week. We'll get to that. I think their DPP was kind of handling this draft for that because obviously Rod got let go here. Craig, any thoughts on Arlington here? Like I said, one of the two quarterbacks, lots of O-line. I'm seeing linebackers on here as well.
Yeah, they had a lot of defense that they addressed. I know James Jackson's guy, South Alabama. I don't remember, NFLPA Bowl, I think he was at. He's a guy that posted up some interesting stuff. I think he's got center guard versatility too. The main one for me, like I said, was Cy. He's a guy that I interviewed personally myself. He's a really interesting guy too, because he tested out last year's draft process at Pro Day. He kind of got some feelers around, didn't get too much interest. Ultimately, tried to he was in the process of transferring to Samford. And this is all just from what he told me, to get to more like a air raid offense down there. Some things fell through. He went to Davenport after that, posted up a pretty good year, posted up a really good pro day after trying to get into a bunch. But there's a lot of places that didn't want him back in as kind of a smaller school guy because he already had tested the year before. So he ultimately went to, I believe, Saginaw Valleys and, sub 4.4 guy. So he's kind of that deep threat they could be looking for. He's a guy that has punting and kicking experience as well.
Ooh. John, what do you think thought process goes in here when you're trying to assemble this? Like if you're Stoops, and obviously it's a pretty low impact, right? Okay, we're going to bring these guys in and we kind of have their rights right now. It's not like we're signing them to contracts today, but what's the thought process going into kind of putting together this list?
Honestly, it's probably number one is you're going to come in with your list of guys that you want to take. I know that Jimmy Johnson used to always do this. A lot of people kind of follow this, which is you have three guys on a list, and that's how you draft. For each pick, you got three guys that you're going to take right there. If one's gone, you take two. If two's gone, you take three. If they're all three are gone, then, you trade the pick. You get rid of it. Mm-hmm. I think that maybe you don't trade the pick here. But, one of the things, too, that you got to think about is when we go through the NFL draft, we have a huge process where everybody's talking to each other, everybody's trading information, everybody's kind of getting, hey, what do you think of this guy? What do you think of that guy? They're getting a feel for everybody else's boards, and it puts value on certain guys, right? So great example is Jahmyr Gibbs. Draft scouts freaked out when he goes 12th overall to Detroit. They're like, why Detroit taking him there? Well, because everybody was talking, and Jahmyr was about to go in the next 3-5 picks. So Detroit had to take him there. It created the value because of those conversations. You don't have the time nor the lengthy conversations to put value on certain guys in this. So I think you come in with a bunch of targets and you say, we need to address this position. We need to address that position. Here was something that we were weak. Here's a guy that fits that mold. Let's go with it. Merlin Robertson, a linebacker at Arizona State, that guy made some serious plays when he was at Arizona State. I think at one point I thought that he was going to be a borderline day 2 guy in the NFL draft. And it was because back in the COVID season, Pac-12 played a shortened season. He made a couple plays that year that just popped on tape with some of his movement ability, coverage skill. Merlin Robertson just didn't take the next step over the next couple of years. That's why he's down here right now. I think there's a guy below Robertson that was on that list.
Oh, let me get over here. Sorry.
You're good. Jordan Wright. Okay. Jordan Wright outside. He's like a rush edge. Okay. Out of Kentucky. Interesting prospect. If I'm remembering correctly, I'm pulling up my scouting report on him. I might have accidentally put him into the next year. No, here he is. Cool. Tough physical player, fits the mold that he replaced Josh Allen, who was drafted in the first round by the Jacksonville Jaguars, not the Buffalo Bills quarterback. He's on the Senior Bowl watch list last year, 6'4", 231. Good zone coverage player, good wrap-up tackler. So, you're kind of getting a guy that you want to put on the outside you can use as a pass rusher. He's got some really solid ability to rush after the passer, good handwork, dips well. So that's what you're going to use him for. That was probably honestly was their first pick out of this list was Jordan Wright. If I had to make a guess, he could be a real impact guy next season immediately.
I want to just ask real quick before we get off of the Arlington thing here. This came out this morning. We have this trade coming down that before, we're trading the rookie draft here. Arlington receiving the 46, it's our skipper, and then Seattle receiving George Moore and the 40th overall selection. Do you make anything about that, or are we like, is it like personnel? Hey, we want this guy over on our side. I don't even understand that.
No, so with Seattle specifically, back in December, Randy Mueller was asking me if I knew any offensive linemen. Randy Mueller being the director of player personnel at Seattle. If I knew any offensive linemen, I sent him 2. One guy was still in college and was contemplating coming out. The other guy he'd been out for a year. The guy coming out of college decided not to come out, decided to stay in. He's going to play at Oklahoma State this year. But he took the guy that we suggested, Barry Wesley, who was out of Colorado State, and he was very concerned about the offensive line all year. So I think that this was more of a, hey, you got somebody that I really want. Is there any way that I can get this guy? The 2 personnel guys are probably sitting in the same room talking about it, and they come up with the trade and they just send it over. Randy's just trying to beef up his offensive line. He feels like that was the weak point of his team last year. And then, Arlington, I mean, we just saw them take 3 linebackers, right? And here they are trading for another one. So they obviously feel like linebacker is the big hole on that roster.
I see Evan here standing by. Sorry, Evan's hiding below there. Craig, any other thoughts on this? We'll bring in Evan as well. Evan was hiding below the fold here of the stream. Hopefully he wasn't sitting there for too long. Sorry. Craig, any other thoughts? We'll bring Evan in.
Not too much on the trade. I mean, it's just kind of a preference and then a pick swap in there too, a couple places. So, I mean, like with Seattle, what John said always makes sense, bringing in another offensive line, because they did have games last year that their offensive line really did struggle. So getting another guy in, like at this point, you're just trying to get as many bodies in and trying to pick the best of the bunch and get, especially with offensive line, get the best 5 guys out there that you can.
All right, let's bring Evan in here. Evan's hiding, like I said, hiding below the fold here. We got Evan. Evan and I were about ready to walk off this. We said, if this doesn't come in here at 1 o'clock, we're done. Evan, we've made it. What are you making of this? We're going through Arlington, and we'll keep going down. But what are you making overall?
Yes, it's been a mad scramble. I'm trying to, put faces to names and figure out where people were and what they were doing. And it's all kind of coming together now. But overall, from what I've seen just in the past couple minutes since this went out, I think it's a pretty solid draft. I'm seeing a lot of guys. It's a very diverse mix of talent. You've got a lot of small schoolers in there, which I like to see personally, especially like Division II level. So I'm very happy about that. But yeah, overall, it just seems like a great poll. Some guys that I'm familiar with, some that I'm not, but enough to where I can talk about it. And that's what's important right now. So yeah.
Do we have any other thoughts on Arlington? I know we talked a little bit before Evan hopped on. Anything else with that? We'll kind of keep going down here. The defenders. I know Mike got that list out quick. I'll give Mike Mitchell credit for that, kind of leaking that before everything else. Anything else here, guys, before we move on?
I'll just add to Coach Craig nailed it. James Jackson was at the NFLPA Bowl, so astonishing memory.
Well, Jared
I
says
think he has guard center versatility too, if I remember correctly.
He says, just think if you took the day off to work to watch the XFL Rookie Draft. Well, we're having fun now. Here, you're getting off work here, crack a beer open. We're doing all this stuff. All right, DC coming up here. We've taken a punter with them. One of the punters gone off the board here. Like I said, Mike got this list out. We'll go first to John. Any thoughts on the defenders?
I think I said it in the group chat before we ever got on this thing. I really like Trey Shropshire. I know that Evan wants to talk about him, so I'm going to let Evan do that. I really like Alex Jensen, who is a very tall, raw offensive lineman out of South Dakota. And I think he was a multi-sport athlete in high school, if I'm remembering correctly. Jensen has a lot of – he was undersized. He moves from tight end, I believe, to offensive lineman. And that's a guy right there that if he just gets some more, repetition, comes out, puts on a little bit more weight, because I think he was at 280, that's a guy that's an NFL dude. And I think that's probably why he's not in the league right now. It's just the raw, needs more time, needs more polish. That's a guy that you could be seeing next year get signed somewhere. Then Mohamed Sanogo, really awesome linebacker, very instinctive, good rangy. He's a little bit undersized, but that's why he's here. But he's going to be a fun guy. DC loves athletic ability. Vaughn Hutchinson's done a great job putting the roster together, and I like what he did with this draft overall.
Evan, thoughts, and then we'll go to Craig. I know you had the player you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, really, there's two players here that I want to talk about. So the first one, like John said, is Trey Shropshire, however you want to say it. I had an opportunity to watch him in person last year when UAB came to play LSU. Didn't really have the best game. I was looking more at Dwayne McBride during that game. But he was someone, I think at some point he led the nation in yards per catch, kind of a big deep ball threat. So again, someone I just want to point out really because I'm surprised, that he's not in the NFL right now. I think he went to a mini camp, but he didn't get signed, and that was a bit surprising. I'm not necessarily surprised that he was undrafted, but I am surprised that he's not, competing for preseason reps in an NFL camp right now. And then the other guy I want to talk about is the player right above that, Ty Scott, the wide receiver from Missouri State. I don't remember too much about him other than that he had a really good game against UT Martin where I think he had 3 touchdowns. I remember watching the tape on that game, and, he had a good connection with Jason Shelley, the quarterback there at Missouri State, and they were pretty good in the FCS this year. I remember they nearly, I think, beat Arkansas at one point last season, so had my eyes on that game as well.
Craig, what about you? Initial thoughts on this list?
Yeah, so I think the grabbing the 3 wide receivers makes sense for them too when you're talking about, like Chris Blair, Brandon Smith, Lucky Jackson. I'm not sure if did Hammond go anywhere?
Evan, you probably know better than I would.
Yeah,
John.
That's the one I don't know about.
But it is worth pointing out that they have had 3 receivers go to the NFL. That's a big hit to their core.
CJ Johnson's one that's kind of interesting too from East Carolina. A lot of his problems have been off the field, but when he's been on the field, he's been really good. And I believe he was a combine invite too for the NFL Combine, and so it's kind of surprising that he hasn't latched on anywhere. And then Matt Carrick actually. I know a little bit about him from Cy Barnett. When I was talking to him, they were carpooling together because they trained together. And he said Carrick was always going on about how he graded out really well, like PFF real early in his career at Michigan State, then apparently had like some type of knee injury, and then obviously didn't test out too great after that. But a guy that has a decent amount of starting experience probably could be pretty good in this league, though.
The interesting thing here is obviously you got to kind of balance Craig was saying, losing certain guys to the NFL, and then obviously just kind of the needs that each of these teams had back in, here last season. John, I mean, DC, pretty complete team. Where did you see they needed to work most besides obviously the NFL guys getting signed up?
Really? I mean, if you look at what cost them at the end of the year, it was a Greg Williams. As much as I love Greg, he can get so aggressive sometimes and throw, the kitchen sink and everything at an offense. And if if one guy misses an assignment on that type of style, it's gone, and I think that's kind of what happened is that game got out of hand and they got just more aggressive trying to make up for it. They were the best team in the XFL, and they just happened to lose the championship game. But I don't see a lot. Obviously, like you said, the talent that goes to the NFL is what you replace. But I think honestly, when you're drafting and you're going up against the other 7 teams, if I'm DC at least, I'm just kind of going, okay, who's good? Who's the best guy right here that I can take? And that's how I'm taking the approach with the draft. I'm not really focused on positions or anything. I'm just looking for pure talent, guys that I know that'll come in and compete. And they got that really well. I did think they did a great job.
We're going to kind of do this is initial kind of whatever kind of thoughts today, everything else on that. I think Rick Saratella is going to join me here for the show next week. Kind of we'll do maybe a deep dive more into this. I know Rick wanted to come on today as well. So I think it's fun. We'll kind of do, freak out here, initial reactions, and then we'll get Rick trying to put together the show for next week. Craig and Evan, any other thoughts on the defenders? I know Evan's going to have a lot to say about the Roughnecks, but anything else on the defenders?
Yeah, not too much about the defenders. I like at the end of the day, I said I like the receivers they brought in. I think it's going to replace some of the guys they potentially lost pretty well.
Evan, anything else?
Not really. I mean, Alex Jensen would maybe be another guy to look at, just someone that I've watched. Again, offensive line, that kind of goes under the radar. And, obviously DC had probably the best offensive line in the XFL this year. And I don't think they've lost a ton of their guys to the NFL in that department yet. So we'll see what happens, but definitely a good depth piece.
Let's go down here. I'll give Evan kind of first crack on this. This is his team. He follows. Evan, thoughts on the Roughnecks and who they picked up?
Yeah, so again, I mean, I was talking about, small school talent earlier and, the Roughnecks, Mark Lillybridge, definitely, picked some under the radar guys, you could put it that way. 2 of the ones that really stood out to me were Quentin Barrow from Grand Valley State. I remember him early in the draft process last year. I want to say he was with the Chiefs at this draft cycle. Briefly, I'd have to check the PR email because that has a ton of info in it. And then Austin Ajaki, I think that's how you pronounce his name, from UNLV, the linebacker. He was at the Hula Bowl, which I do stuff for, and I think he was at the Shrine Bowl too, if I'm not mistaken. So he was definitely attracting some talent. I know he was with the Panthers at one point, but again, I haven't really done a deep dive into this haul yet. Like you said, it's initial reactions, but I like it so far. It's going to be fun, going through these guys because a lot of the names don't initially jump out on paper, but this is sort of more of a hidden gem type of class to me, and I really like that.
John, we'll toss to you here. Thoughts on the Roughnecks?
Jason Ademolia. I'm probably slaughtering that right now. Notre Dame up there at the top. He and his brother played at Notre Dame. Very talented duo. Back when they were there, I'm really surprised he's not in the NFL. That's a really solid pickup for the defensive line. I'm glad that Evan talked about Barrow because Barrow is another one of these raw, tall body types. Was on the Senior Bowl watch list last year as well. Did the Shrine Bowl. And then Marcus Minor is an interesting offensive lineman. I'm surprised he's not in the league. He's a guard, could play a little bit of center in a pinch if you need him to. Craig, you know anything about Lindsey Scott Jr.?
Just a little bit. Which was he NFLPA able?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, he got hurt at the end of it. Yep. If you want to talk about him, I'll save him for you. So.
No, you can go ahead with him. But I think it's an interesting fit with Houston. He's going to fit their offense pretty well.
Yeah, he's a smaller quarterback, more mobile, gets around. He's got a decent arm, can push the ball pretty well. He was also drafted by the USFL, which is very intriguing here. I think Pittsburgh drafted him. So a little bit of competition. I know the CFL was interested in bringing him up there too, and I think he was just waiting to see what his NFL opportunities would look like. So the world is wide open for Lindsey Scott. He can go to whatever league that he absolutely wants right now.
Yeah, we have here a couple comments. Yeah, Max said Lindsey Scott to the Roughnecks. He's excited. Next to PJ, mark my words. And then we have Ty as well, calling him a hidden gem. So people really high on Lindsey Scott Jr. Obviously, USFL as well. They're off to see what he does.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah.
Go
ahead. Sorry.
Good.
No, go ahead. You got you.
Craig,
I was gonna say, I think he went to a couple mini camps too, but didn't end up getting signed.
Yep.
I'm trying to just
might be injury related still, you know.
Yeah, just looking at any other comments here. We have Mike, just while I have everyone other thing. Mike believes in Von Hutchins, and then Max is also talking Arlington badly needed a backup quarterback, so maybe they can get that going there with that. All right, let's go back up here. Any other thoughts on the Roughnecks here before we move on?
I was just gonna,
or you can go.
Go, Craig.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention Marvin Pierre real quickly too. He was out of Kent State. He's a guy that kind of bouncing around, was trying to get an interview, but time slots didn't all work out for between the two of us. So he had a pretty interesting career. He started off at like a community college. He went to like Murray State after that. Super athletic, but still pretty raw. But I think he's a guy that maybe ends up being like a 3-4 edge rusher for them.
Evan, John, anything else on here? We'll keep scrolling.
Yeah, I was just going to add a bit about Lindsey Scott Jr., since obviously that's another exciting pick. Not one that I mentioned earlier, but someone, John and Craig have already talked about. I believe he was with the Jets in their mini camp for a bit. Definitely an intriguing prospect. I watched a lot of Lindsey Scott last year at Incarnate Ward, and he was, I think, one of 3 Incarnate Ward players drafted here in this rookie draft, because they had a really good season last year in the FCS. But for those who maybe aren't familiar with the Lindsey Scott kind of backstory, super old at this point. I think he's 25, which, well, by, I guess sort of rookie standards is old, being 25. Came out of the FCS, had been to a ton of schools, was in community college at one point, started off at LSU way back when, eventually ended up at Nicholls State, I think, and then, finally got on his feet at Incarnate Ward and had a phenomenal season last year. I mean, one of the best seasons you could ask as a quarterback. Now, I do agree. I do think he fits this offense really well. But, do I think that he is an immediate starter? I'm not quite sure about that. I think right now he kind of slots in. I mean, we'll see what happens, obviously, with the quarterback room between Brandon Silvers, Cole McDonald, and Caleb Ellaby. I would expect either maybe McDonald or Ellaby to leave, which would put Lindsey Scott, possibly in the quarterback 2 job. So I would hope, again, like John said, he was drafted by the USFL. The CFL is interested in him. He has a lot of options here. So this is, not saying that he's going to be with the Roughnecks next year, but assuming that he is, since this is an XFL stream, I would really like to see him get some reps at some point. Again, not saying he's going to start from day one. He still is a bit raw in some areas coming out of the FCS, but he does have a lot of experience. I think he was in college for like 6 or 7 years or something ridiculous with the COVID eligibility. So it'll be fun to see what happens to him for sure.
Curious, I don't know. Is Brandon Silvers, is he back as QB1? I mean, I love Brandon, friend of the show. I mean, longtime friend. But we have an interesting here. Sam brings up talking with Lindsey, because obviously, him being with USFL, do you go to the XFL just by default? And then if you get cut, then you go, because certainly the USFL is not sitting there. It's like the CFL neg-list, right? Like if you ever come in with that, but I mean, what do you guys make of that? Because this is kind of the first little brush of this. I imagine we'll keep seeing this maybe in the future. But what do you guys think about this, John?
I like this. I like this Shady Sports Network. Who's
Sam,
behind Shady?
Sam Just. Sam Just.
I'd have to see his face. I'm a face guy.
Sorry. Go give Sam a follow. But anyway, what do you make of this, John?
So I love this idea, because and this is not something I thought of yet because of the way that the calendar's set up. So you have the NFL, obviously. You're probably, if you're not signed to a futures, and they let you go at the end of the year, that you're looking at January, which is right when the XFL is starting. If you don't make it with the XFL, just get released. They're going to 90-man rosters, like you mentioned this year. That means they're going to cut it down to whatever that they end up cutting it down, 54, whatever it is. That's a lot of guys that are going to be looking for another job. So go up there, get the coaching, see if you can't make it. Then if you don't make it, the USFL will pick you up, because it's just anything that, anything to take away from the XFL at this point, you know?
Oh, I thought you were gonna say like anything that moves. Like, oh, you got the pulse. Like, come on in.
No, like anything to take like, oh, okay, the XFL couldn't use you. Okay, we'll use you. You know, that's kind of like that's the battle that's going on between these two leagues right now. You know, it's entertaining.
It's like I can't remember his name, John Fromm or whatever at the end of XFL 01. Like, do I have a pulse and do I still play football? Like, yes, I do. Let's go play. Like, that's the USFL's motto here. Like, do you have a pulse? Can you throw the football? Like, come on down here. Coach Craig, any thoughts on this? The faction from between the XFL and the USFL?
I'm just going to say it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out over the next couple of years and just between the two leagues. But it's also a great thing at the same time because more of these guys are going to get opportunities.
Evan, anything for you or else we'll go to the Guardians?
Yeah, I mean, this whole XFL, USFL player debate, like, the USFL took an interesting approach having their sort of, college rights draft or whatever you want to call it before the actual NFL draft. And the XFL is doing it in June, right when, guys are sort of being, filtered out, like, whether or not, like, you're invited to a mini camp and then you sign a UDFA deal, or some guys have already been cut from their UDFA deals. So I think that gives the XFL a bit more leverage and it makes it seem more, like the XFL, I guess it makes it seem like a better opportunity for the player, because a lot of these players that were drafted, into the USFL college thing or whatever you want to call it, the pool, they weren't really aware. There was a clip of Malik Cunningham, talking about, he didn't really know what the Birmingham Stallions were. And, now he's with the Patriots, working out at receiver. Some was the most recent update. So it's an interesting dilemma. I definitely think these leagues will kind of make it harder, for like a player to go to another, like jumping. Because like before, I mean, the XFL was pretty strict on like, we will allow guys to go to the NFL, but there's no, kind of out clause or whatever for say the USFL or the CFL or one of these leagues that's playing at the same time, because they know guys, want to find opportunities, but at the same time, you kind of have to show commitment. And that's going to be something we didn't see a ton of it this year. I mean, there were a couple guys like, Davion Davis is someone I've talked about who was on the Roughnecks and then went to the Stallions to get more playing time, more film. And he left the XFL pretty early, like after 2 weeks. So worked out for him. But I think it could become more controversial in the future where guys maybe don't realize like, hey, I can't just jump from one league to another. Like maybe that wasn't made clear to me. So definitely something that will be worth following. It's not just, it sounds, kind of funny and pointless when we're sitting here talking about it. And, we're not even really talking about too many specific players that are connected to that. But I think in the future, like, it could really sort of push this XFL and USFL war even further.
All right, let's get here back to this. John, Guardians, we had Coach Buck on our, the pregame kickoff show and everything else, admitted maybe kind of first year blunders and trying to kind of develop all this. How did Coach Buck do in the Guardian staff here and kind of ramping up over the summer?
So the first thing about it, I got the chance to talk to him too. I did the draft. I think it was a day 3 draft show. I did it with Jeff Barnes and his group, Draft Central. And we had Coach Buck come on for a half an hour, and it was a great conversation. He's a great guy, awesome to talk to. The first thing that I think that they needed to address was you got to get guys that want to be there. I think he said that halfway through the year, where there was a lot of issues with guys that just didn't want to be there, just didn't put in the effort that he wanted. He's a little bit more of an old school guy in the approach too. It's a little bit harder to get away with that now. To get away with, the old school coaching approach. But, all of these guys that they picked up right here, I mean, I could go on a spiel about every single one of these guys. I'm just going to pick a few. Darius Joyner, good defensive back out of Duke. Really surprised he's not in the NFL. Joyner is a corner. He's a little bit undersized. That's probably why he's not somewhere right now. But he's fast. He's good. He's got good agility, quick. Jaquez Jones, awesome linebacker. Kinsler out of Alcorn State was probably one of the better talents at that level in that division this past year. And then Brock Martin. Brock Martin I was a fan. I watched him against Notre Dame in the bowl game 2021, maybe New Year's 2021. And he was dominant against some NFL talent in that game. He just didn't replicate it everywhere else. So lots of potential here, lots of talent, and guys that show the passion, the drive, the desire to be on the field at every turn. That's what I kind of see on this list.
Craig, what do you make of this?
Yeah, so I think addressing the trenches was kind of a big part here for them. It seems like. I know Sharp was a guy that you didn't talk about there out of Mississippi State. I think he's another guy that's got center guard versatility. I think he's another NFLPA guy like James Jackson was earlier. But just getting that offensive line, that defensive line kind of straightened up is going to be kind of a big thing for them. And I think they did a pretty good job with that overall. And then Horst was another guy that was drafted by the USFL, so it'll be interesting to see the battle for him.
Oh, Drew Horst, there you go. In the trenches there. Evan, what do you make of the Guardians? Any names stand up?
Yeah, I would say Jared Horst. He was a Hula Bowl guy. Again, like Craig just pointed out, he was also drafted into the USFL. I believe Trey Shropshire was too, one of the players we talked about earlier for DC and Memphis. So yeah. So again, there's going to be a couple of these battles, right? But he's an interesting guy. Again, him and LaQuinston Sharp, both, that Guardians offensive line we talked about ad nauseum during the season, how much they struggled. Earlier I was saying DC had the best offensive line in the league, so whatever they're going to draft there is for depth. But for Orlando, I feel like, there's some more immediate pieces that they may need, at those positions, really, whether it's tackle, guard, or anything. And then the other one that I'll talk about here is Kieran Kinsler from Alcorn State. I had an opportunity to scout him in person. Wasn't really a player that I had my eyes on during the game. Like, he wasn't really on my list, but he kind of stood out. I had some people telling me like, oh, you should, take a look at him. And I was like, oh, okay, we'll see, what he's about. And yeah, as it turns out, he definitely impressed. And like John said, at that level, probably one of the better, defensive backs that you could ask for. So Guardians get a good pickup there. And most importantly too, continuing that sort of HBCU trend that the XFL has been pushing, because, they're going to have the, another HBCU showcase in Atlanta this year at Clark Atlanta University. And then, I thought that was a good pick. Again, not just for the player, but for sort of the culture and the image as a whole.
Just throwing it out here. They do, and that kind of reminded me of that. We do have 2 showcases this weekend as well. We're doing the HBCU, like Evan said, and then we have one in Atlanta. So, like, this isn't the end of the road if you're one of these rookies that didn't get picked up in this. And like I thought, Russ, and like I said at the top of the stream, Russ and Doug did a great job, kind of talking about the purpose of this draft, and then kind of the one they're going to do in the fall, and then the supplemental one as well. So, still opportunities here during the summer if you're a player watching this to get your name in there, do one of these showcases, and then get into the combine that way. We just wanted to throw that out there. Lots of talent here. I mean, John, what do you make of this? Kind of like a explosion of riches here. We've got this draft. Now we've got 6 more showcases coming up. I know they announced the Nick Novak specialist showcase as well. What do you make of kind of how they're approaching the summer?
I like it, and again, it goes back to what we were talking about with guys still kind of trying to figure out what their career looks like. Is this something that I need to continue pursuing? Is this something that I've hit the end of the road? It's time to move on and find something new to do with my life, or find another way to get into football. That's kind of where a lot of these guys get to at this point of the year. I don't want to oust people, so I don't want to say names, but it's like I've been having a lot of these conversations with guys, just trying to help them. Hey, is it realistic to continue? So these showcases, it gives them another opportunity to go out there. I think at the very least, you need to take that opportunity as a player and go to these showcases and just see where you stand against everyone else. Mm-hmm. The other thing, too, is players need to be objective. And that's a very difficult thing to ask a player to do, but they need to have people that are objective around them to tell them how they compare to everyone else. Because, I heard from every single rookie that was at NFL minicamp this year, or was let in. Oh, I was the best guy there. I bet you were, buddy. Right. But that's why they let you go. I'm not trying to talk you down or anything, man, but it's the reality of the situation, which is you need to have the subjective people around you in these showcases. While it is an opportunity, without those subjective people there that are going to be supportive, but at the same time realistic, it's really not worth your time.
Craig, any thoughts on this?
I mean, just like at the end of the day, like it's anything in life, whether it's sports or anything, you're always trying to get better. So I I don't even know how to word this right now, honestly.
That's okay. Evan, anything else here? We have a comment just real quick from Mike saying, likes the Guardians basically drafting all defense out of the O-line. Their offense wasn't the issue last year once they got going. Evan, any other thoughts on Guardians? Any of this stuff? We'll go on to the Brahmas.
I mean, if we want to talk about, sort of the league's position in this specific draft in general, it's really nice to see the XFL sort of getting off to an early start. I was kind of surprised when they announced this rookie draft happening so soon, a month after the championship game. Just goes to show that this really is a year-round operation, right? And they're jumping into these summer showcases again. There's no real slowing down, because once all these showcases are done, then you're going to get into the regular draft and then the supplemental after that. So, the offseason in this league, even though the actual season only spans a couple months, 10 games, whatever, outside of playoffs, there's a lot of work going in outside of that I really hope gets recognized. And it's good to see the league, again, continuing to do that after year one and not just showing it off, the first time and being like, oh, this is, our model or whatever. And then it just turns out to be a gimmick. Like, they're very serious about this, and you can tell. And that's very good to see. Again, like them going back to the HBCUs, expanding it to a different school for their showcase, and then just having those showcases again in general in other parts of the country. Really good to see is the bottom line. And I hope that continues for many years to come.
Okay, to build off what you said there, Evan, too, because it not only are they showing it with these types of events, but they're doing this despite all the reports that just recently came out about The Rock losing $60 million this year. And they're still conducting business like it's normal, and obviously it's not normal to lose $60 million in a season, but they are understanding what is going to happen, it's going to take time for this to develop, and they're willing to be patient with it. So that speaks volumes about how serious they're taking it too.
It's probably a good thing that we have this actual football to talk about this week. I don't think you want to have a read unscripted episode talking about kind of everything that's gone on this week. So purely, I don't know. I would take an L and move on. Some of the people that are involved in a lot of this has been interesting that way. I will say Andy and I have had lots of talks in the last couple of weeks, kind of what do we want the XFL offseason to look like? And this is good. As someone that did, I think it was 135 weeks of podcasting without an XFL ball being snapped, I like having some of this coming. I would have liked to have been able to do this real time today. I don't think that would have been that unmanageable to kind of figure out, but I do appreciate this now. This is good to have all this. Let's go here. Let's go to the Brahmas. We'll go to Evan first. Evan, anyone stand out here from the Brahmas?
Let's take a look. There were a couple. Jaleel Billingsley right off the bat from Texas, someone, a bigger name, maybe from a bigger school. That one stands out. Just going down the list. Yeah, Darius Gaines was the one that I really wanted to talk about. Okay, so Darius Gaines was someone I nearly interviewed last year from Western Colorado. Again, a Division II school, going back to that whole, sort of small school narrative. He was someone I nearly interviewed, didn't really get the chance to, but, Western Colorado has always been a school, at least on my radar, ever since Austin Eckler came out of there a couple years ago. And, look what he's done in the NFL since then, however many years it's been. But he's definitely a good player. And he was signed, I believe, by the Broncos, which are sort of the hometown team for him, but then was quickly cut, replaced with someone else. Might have been another one of the XFL guys, if I'm not mistaken, because I know Denver brought in, Ben DiNucci, Jarquez Patrick, who isn't there anymore, obviously. And then I know Trent Harris was there for minicamp. And then, outside of that, Chris Smith from Louisiana Lafayette, another guy that I got to see in person last year and that I've interacted with. It's actually kind of surprising to see how many players I know personally on this list or that I've watched in person. Chris Smith, I believe he was with the Seahawks in their mini camp. Again, when I was out there at ULL doing scouting stuff, one of these names where it wasn't really on my radar going in, but I kind of left the game like, hey, this is, maybe someone that, is going to go to the NFL. Because at the time, my attention was on Andre Jones, who was drafted by the Commanders in the 7th round. And they had a couple other guys, too. I think it was Michael Jefferson, their receiver, who was unfortunately injured in a car accident and likely won't play this year. But, that's getting a bit off topic there, unfortunately. But anyway, Chris Smith, definitely a talented running back. Glad to see him on this list. And I think that's probably it on my end for Brahmas players.
Evan's so funny. He's like, "Oh, it's funny how many people I've got to interact with here in network." Evan, it's almost like you're good at what you're doing here, and you're going out and you're seeing everybody.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's
Mhm.
telling me that I'm doing the right thing.
I think so. I think if you look at the list here and you can talk about half the guys on it having met personally, I think you're probably doing okay. John, what do you make of any of the Brahmas standouts here?
I mean, he already mentioned Billingsley, who was at Alabama before he transferred to Texas, and got into some trouble at Alabama, which is part of the reason why he transferred. He had an on-team suspension, but went to Texas. Also dealt with some on-team issues, so he only played 3 games last year. But this is a guy that's immensely talented. If he can get on the field, he's going to absolutely kill it if he gets a shot. He's a vertical threat, very solid receiver, not a great blocker, more so a receiver. So you're probably going to see him sort of in a role like St. Louis used Hakeem Butler. But Billingsley is not quite that big, but that's very similar to how you use him. The other guy that kind of popped at me that wasn't talked about yet was Dylan O'Quinn coming out of Cincinnati. That guy's huge. And I know because I had to sit next to him on the bus at the Tropical Bowl on the way back to the hotel. Like, I had a great conversation with him, but that guy, I was like, that he took up the whole seat. It was a 2-man seat, and he was 2 men. So I was unfortunately on the inside of that seat, and we had a really good conversation. Just talked about being in Cincinnati, some of the things that he's working on. He is huge. Like, I don't think he's bigger than that 6'4", 305 they're saying, dude.
Yeah, no, he looks like a big puppy here. That's why.
But no, I like it. I think that again, you gotta come in here looking at talent, and you're just trying to get guys that can come in and compete and strengthen the roster as a whole. And I think they did that.
Coach Craig, any thoughts on the Brahmas?
Yeah, so I know a couple of these guys here. RJ Hubert out of Utah. He's a guy that tested out really well. He's a guy I was trying to get on for an interview, but you can't really find any way to get a hold of him, oddly enough. The one guy I saw that was talking about him was like his uncle or something like that. But it should be an interesting guy. Maybe he's almost kind of like a moldable piece of clay. See what he ends up being there. Dylan Thomas out of Missouri State's another one. I talked with a couple of people he trained with. They said he's a really good dude. One of them stayed with him. They had nothing but good things to say about him. So just kind of playing at the smaller school, trying to make that next jump up. It should be kind of interesting there. I know the Central Michigan wide receiver, Carlos Curry, he's like 6'5", but at like 205 or whatever. But oddly enough, only did 4 reps on the bench. So that was kind of a fun fact.
We got a couple comments here. Draft guy Jimmy Billingsley would be NFL. He didn't have the on-field issues. Denzel, Uncle Denzel, checking in late to the stream, but Kaka Denzel, owner of, I think it was like the Spring League Generals jersey. I think Denzel won. If you want to know how our giveaways kind of going here, and then Act My Age, everyone's freaking out over the 60 million losses. Seem to forget the AAF loss. Yeah, I've never seen more people contribute nothing to conversations except just noise, and I'm like, all like you got Evan, all these guys writing stuff every week, and John's putting out content, and Coach Craig here's, but like I've never seen more people just like talking and having like nothing to contribute at all to any sort of conversation. Anything else on the Brahmas here? We'll go to the Sea Dragons. I know Haley, the social girl over at the Sea Dragons, really hyped for our picks. Anything else before I pull up that roster? We good? Okay.
I think so.
All right. Who wants to start here? Let's go. Coach Craig, any thoughts on the Sea Dragons? Got a lot of defenses, and we got a lot of defense and O-line on here. What do you got?
Yeah, so I think probably one of the bigger ones here is going to be Titus Swen out of Wyoming. He had a solid year, kind of left the team on bad terms. So that's going to be the big question with him. So kind of proving it there. I think he was Shrine Bowl, correct? Is he Shrine Bowl or NFLPA?
NFLPA, I do believe. I'm going to double check that for you.
I know it was one of the two. I always mix some of those guys up between those two. So, there is some disagreement with the coaching staff at Wyoming, off the field issues stuff. So that's kind of why he's not.
Yeah, it looks like it says on here. Yeah, I just was Googling it, but said, why was Titus Swen dismissed from the team? So obviously something that's kind of following him right now. But hey, maybe you can use this to kind of get that, get another shot.
Yeah, and then I'm trying to look through here too. I think Townsend tested well, but I'm trying to look that back up too out of Texas Tech, but I think and Reeder was a guy that's one of those older guys at Iowa State, if I remember correctly. Too, their whole defense was old as heck. It seemed like.
Evan,
But
any names standing out for you on here?
Let me take a look. I know Colby Reeder was at the Hula Bowl, so that's one. Chad Townsend, I'm familiar with the name from Texas Tech. Didn't really get to watch a lot of him. I'm going to save my talking for the Battlehawks because the Battlehawks took a lot of players. So we'll get into that.
John, any thoughts on? You got to talk about our Sea Dragons here. I need someone that can give me some faith here. Losing Danucci and everything else. What do you make of the Sea Dragons?
Yeah. Okay. So first off, okay, is Bolden on the Sea Dragons or is he next team?
No, he's not.
Oh, he's next team. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to jump ahead. All right. So let's start with Malcolm Lee coming out of Kansas. Intriguing defensive lineman. Definitely watched him a little bit last year. Didn't get a lot of comprehensive notes, but I am surprised to see him not competing in the NFL. Colby Reeder, you guys mentioned, I think his brother plays in the NFL. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Troy Reeder is his brother, who is with the Rams, and Troy. I think he still is. So that's his younger brother. You guys mentioned Titus Swim
somewhere else this offseason. I don't remember where.
Okay.
Vikings.
Troy Reeder, it might have been. Troy Reeder was kind of like that mix of defensive end and outside linebacker, and they would move him between the two. Colby is more of a traditional linebacker, somebody that you want in the box to kind of play downhill. He's pretty good. Destin Talbert is a very underrated name that just popped up out of North Dakota State. Talbert's a guy I've been watching the last couple of years, really popped in the spring season. And that's another guy I'm excited. I'm really surprised is not in the NFL right now. Also, the last guy I'll talk about is Peyton Wilgar. Wilgar at BYU is a legit linebacker. He and Reeder are going to help strengthen that unit a lot. I think they're going to both come in and compete. And Wilgar, he's a little bit undersized in the sense that, at least for the NFL level, he's just under 6'1". I want to say 230 pounds, maybe 225. But he's legit, man. Like he's a vicious tackler, pretty darn instinctive. I think his one knock is he doesn't play as well in coverage.
Yeah, draft guy Jimmy's talking. Talbert, good job at his pro day. He's a good press corner. So good. Seems like you got some shared sentiment there. You guys, anything else on the Sea Dragons? We'll keep scrolling on. Anyone else have any comments?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say Townsend too. I had listed down at running back initially, but he ran a 4.45, 10.9 broad jump, so that was pretty good there. Change of direction was kind of what hurt him there, but be interesting to see kind of his role in that offense. Since they do have him listed at wide receiver, maybe it ends up being kind of like a TJ Hammonds.
Interesting. I appreciate that. Good feedback. All right, let's go here. Evan's got a lot to talk about the Battlehawks, and then we have a lot of caca in the chat as well. What do you make of the Battlehawks here, Evan?
Yeah, so I think there's 4 players here that I'm going to talk about. And the first one is Johnny Buchanan, the linebacker from Delaware. I believe he was the FCS leading tackler. He reached out to me before the draft. He was really, pushing his name. So good to see that Anthony Becht and company have, given him an opportunity, because I really do think, he's earned one. He went to 2 mini camps between the Eagles and the Steelers and didn't latch on with either team. Again, linebacker, seems to be one of those positions where teams carry a lot of them, but, it's going to be hard to, get playing time, especially on teams like the Eagles and Steelers. I mean, I'm not going to go through and, look at the Eagles and Steelers linebacking rooms right now, but you get the idea. The next one, Darion Chafin from Incarnate Ward. This guy, to me, flew under the radar a bit. One of the targets last year, I believe, for Lindsey Scott Jr., who we talked about earlier. Taylor Grimes was the guy that got talked a lot about, coming out of UIW. And, Darion Chafin, to me, was like, not the better receiver, but definitely someone who you couldn't throw under the bus. And again, good to see him get picked up here. Going down the list, we've got Kamor Gamble, the tight end from Central Florida. Another player that I've scouted in person, got to see him live. He was at the Hula Bowl. Again, I don't know a ton about Kamor Gamble. Jimmy's in our chat, so he can probably, give you a bit more info on that. And then the last guy here is probably Jadrian Taylor, who I interviewed last year from Texas, El Paso. He was just in camp with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and he's been pushing his name around a lot too. So it's good to see him on that list. I do think that he was, again, worthy of a shot like this. I don't think he went to an NFL minicamp. I think he kind of just jumped right in with the CFL early, got the head start on that, and then now he's gonna try for the XFL. Wouldn't be surprised if he was one of the guys who signed and did play in the league next year. Same with Buchanan, like I mentioned earlier, because those guys showed interest. But I think that's probably it for the Battlehawks guys on my end.
John, we'll go to you. Any thoughts?
Nico Bolden, very fun cornerback. I'm pulling up his notes here real quick. Before I get on to Bolden, I'm going to back up what Evan said about Gamble. He is a possession receiver, not a great athlete. I think that's why he was initially at Florida, transferred down to UCF. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably why he's down here. His hands are a little bit iffy, but he's capable, and he's not a great blocker. So he's really like an H-back. I think it's probably the way that you want to use him. I think he's a little undersized as well. Gamble, he's 6'2". And 6'8" and 243 is what he weighed in at. So you got a guy that's a little bit smaller and isn't a great blocker. That's an H-back that you're going to try to use in the slot, essentially, like a big slot. James Bostic is an interesting receiver. I saw him. I know that he's listed Ohio. He had some ties to Vanderbilt, did this pro day there. And that's where I saw him and got eyes on him live. He looked pretty good. He was throwing with some USC quarterback that had never played. I think was the quarterback working out there that day. But he ran decently, ran well. I think he had the fastest 40 out of anybody there. And then Jacob Gall went to the Tropical Bowl. He's interesting. Now the problem with Gall was he gets down the Tropical Bowl and his pads aren't there, because they have to ship their pads to these all-star games to perform in them. So, and they never got there. So he was a healthy scratch for the Tropical Bowl because he had no pads. But he was a good guy, good to talk to. Definitely has a smart, good head on his shoulder. So those are the names outside of the ones that, Evan mentioned already that popped at me a little bit.
Craig, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can't say too much more. I think Buchanan will take over at their linebacker position where they kind of got a hole at now at this point in time. Like John said, and I'm just add on with Bolden too. He was a guy that tested extremely well for his size, like 6'3", 208, 4'4", 40, 41-inch vertical, 10.7 broad. Like there's a good chance that he ends up being something for the Battlehawks if he gets on the field for them.
Let me see here. I got a couple comments I'm pulling up. I just had a wedding inquiry come in here. I got to respond to real quick. We have a couple comments in the chat. Richard pumped. This is great. Now XFL 2024, we're going to have offense, defense of the year. Denzel, of course, Battlehawks loaded again. He's all excited. Draft guy, Jimmy. Gilmore Gamble is a good athlete, just not the biggest guy. XFL extra points checking in. Townsend also. Texas at primary kickoff returner as well as splitting time at wide receiver running back. Gamble put 21 reps in his pro day, 80-inch wing.
Ooh.
And then Max is pointing out, I hadn't even paid attention. The draft picks are listed in alphabetical order. I guess we'll never know the order. John, are you going to be able to sleep at night not knowing the order in which the XFL rookie draft picks were selected?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, Max might not, so I got to ask. I got to check on that. Guys, any other thoughts on this? We'll get the Vipers, and then we'll try to do some final thoughts. Nope, we're good. All right, let's get here. Vegas Vipers here coming off. We fired our, we've not fired, but we've mutually parted ways with our head coach, Rob Woodson. All this. Let's start with Coach Craig. Any thoughts on the Vegas Vipers here? Like I said, I think DPP over there, Joey, is kind of taking care of the picks right now.
Mm-hmm. Let me see here. I was trying to look up Darius Nash because I feel like his name was familiar. There's a couple Utah Tech guys that tested really well. I know it was him and I want to say Colby Williams, but I'm still looking for some stuff here. If you want to go to somebody else, you can.
Evan, any names you want to pop on?
Yeah, there's probably, let's see, maybe two guys I can talk about here. The first being Stacy I'm not going to try not to butcher that last name. Stacy Chukwuemezi from Northern Arizona. Another guy that I was close to interviewing, didn't end up happening due to time reasons, but we've been in touch, and he was invited to Giants mini camp. He was someone that had an injury in college, and I think that hindered a bit of his production, kind of took a toll. But from what I remember, he had pretty good measurables, and I knew the NFL was going to take notice of him, even if he, again, kind of slowed down on the stat sheet. I don't know how he performed last season because I was going off, sophomore and junior year stats when I first talked to him. But yeah, Stacy Chukwuemezi would be a good weapon. And then the other guy here is Robert Mitchell from North Carolina Central. Not too familiar with the player himself, but again, North Carolina Central, HBCU school. I know Davius Richard was, a really good quarterback at NC Central last year, and he was helping block him. So it seems like a good pickup to me.
John, we'll toss to you. Any other thoughts on this?
So Robert Mitchell did the HBCU Legacy Bowl this year. Came in, he was definitely one of the guys that I was kind of watching. I thought he had some heavy feet overall, at least in the combine notes that I took, but measured in good 6'2", 304, 33.5-inch arms, which is great. He's probably a guard at the next level. So, yeah, keeping the HBCU pipeline going. Jamari Edwards out of James Madison, that's another guy that I really like. As a defensive line prospect, I'm pulling up my notes because guys, you got to understand, I've been so into this next draft class that I'm having to pull this stuff up to remember. Yeah, so I saw Jamari at the Tropical Bowl, but I was tracking him before he got down there. He's a transfer from Marshall. He played his last year at James Madison, showed some decent handwork, and was jokingly kind of told by a teammate, "Oh, he's not the smartest fella." But that was the little note that I got. He's fun. He's a fun guy. He's a little bit of a goofball, but he's a fun dude to be around, and I think he's got a really good shot at making an impact in a rotation in the XFL.
Craig, any other thoughts now that you got your notes up?
Yeah, so Nash I went back to on Utah Tech. He was a pretty decent player there. He did come down to safety when I was listening to him. I was trying to remember between him and Kobe Williams. I thought one was a corner, one was a safety, but apparently they both listed as safety here. So he's kind of an interesting prospect. Tested out pretty, slightly above average, I'd call it. But if he gets a chance, he could be somebody that's a little bit interesting. Evan already talked about Stacy. I was going back and looking at some of his stats too. So it looks like this year he only had like 15 receptions, but he's still coming back from that injury from last year is what it looks like. So he's, the guy that really just needs a chance. And if he can prove that he's healthy, then he might get a bigger shot at some point in time too.
Let me get here. Let's get out of this. We got a couple of last comments here. We need to get Draft Guy Jimmy just like on the stream sometime here. Talking, Jerry Edwards, interesting versatile. That's like the defensive end, runs to tackle, good length, 33.5 arm, 87/8 wing, NFL PA invite, XFL extra points as well. TJ Green runs a 4.34 well, there you go. We've gone through all 8 teams here in I think pretty good pace. I don't, this didn't need to be a 6-hour episode here, but any other thoughts before we get out of here? I guess we'll go Evan, we'll go around here. I'll do some kind of closing notes.
Yeah, well, again, like I said at the top of the stream, pretty solid list, very well-rounded. I'm pleased with the selections, and most importantly, I think a lot of these guys, can play in the XFL, and they're not just going to be guys that, end up in the NFL and never touch the league. Again, it would be great if all these guys could get an NFL opportunity, but we've talked, before about how this is a numbers game. Rosters fill up quickly. Not everyone's going to make it. So with that in mind, I think these picks, were very well thought out. And, overall, I'm impressed. There was plenty to talk about here, and it'll be interesting to see, who kind of lasts into the XFL regular season. Again, assuming, a majority of these guys do join the teams, because keep in mind, the offseason rosters are expanding from 70 to 90. That's a big difference. That's 20 more players. So it will be interesting to go back and see how many picks out of these 80 actually do make XFL regular season rosters, after cuts and everything like that.
Coach Craig, anything else from you?
Yeah, I think even what Evan was saying there too, just the transition of these teams in general as we go forward, because obviously they're going to have another draft after more NFL cuts are done and everything else like that. and then see the directions that these teams take. And I think between like the first year and the second year of the XFL, it feels like there's going to be a lot more turnover than like say the first year and the second year of the USFL. When I go back through it, when I start doing some of my research with that, because you see a lot of the same names in the USFL, it feels like the XFL might be a little bit more turnover. And I also be very interested to see like what quarterbacks end up going to some of these teams too, because there's ultimately going to be quarterbacks that are either cut from NFL camps because more teams are holding on to those extra camp arms, especially for training camp, preseason, everything else like that. Which ones of those guys end up like down in the XFL, and kind of who else gets a shot, since we only saw a couple of quarterbacks in this actual draft.
Bless you there, John. Yeah, it's hard. Like, it's one thing, and I learned this very quickly when we did our coverage last year. I wasn't able to do the USFL draft, and I think we did the supplemental draft. And even from the normal draft to the supplemental draft, the number of players the casual fan knows is quite low, if any. And so obviously that's why we rely on you guys. So it's always hard on here. Like, I don't know how they market these things. I know Rick's been on before, and we said, you kind of do something like this, and maybe we have a list of guys ahead of time so we can kind of prep a little bit more, right? And kind of know where this is kind of like the scatter shot of, okay, who do we know on here? Like, or if you guys have been given the list of, here's the top 120 guys being looked at, you could probably sit there and scratch a couple notes for each one of them. So I don't know like really what the best way is to handle this. I know it's hard to kind of generate, excitement following the initial one, but it was, I don't know what people were expecting today, but kind of in line with what I was looking at. John, anything else from you?
Yeah, it's really hard to put, a list of 120 to the top guys that they're looking at together, because everybody's looking for different things. And this is something that, we were just talking about this past week on the Sick podcast that we just launched. That's going to be NFL draft focused. The big thing about it is in the NFL, you've got 32 different philosophies. And it goes back to what I said on the opening, which is in the NFL, you have all these guys talking to each other for months. As they're going to these different events and they're looking at these different guys and taking in all this information, looking at their testing, doing pro days, doing all-star games, the combine, et cetera, so on. And you get to build this sort of consensus idea of where a guy is valued, based on those conversations that you're having. Whereas something like this, you don't have that, and it's just because you've got 8 guys. They don't have traditional scouting departments in the XFL. So you've got 8 guys that are making the decisions, and they don't sit there and talk to each other all year. They're not spending months talking to each other. So that's kind of the thing that you've got right now is 8 different people putting together their own separate lists of what fits what they're looking for in their team, with all of the uncertainty at the coaches right now, who's going to stay, who's going to go. Seattle doesn't know if they're keeping their coach. Vegas already let theirs go. There's a couple others that could potentially be leaving, and it might not even be for bad reasons. It might be because they get another job opportunity somewhere else that's a better opportunity for them. So you don't know what your schemes look like. And so when you're trying to put a roster together for that, the best approach is, all right, who's talented? Who's really good? Who's good at what they do? And I'm going to pick that, and we're going to see if we can't use that moving forward.
I think that's good feedback. Do I have to worry about, well, I don't know if I'm worried or not about Coach Haslett leaving.
I have heard that they don't know who the coach will be. So I don't know if that's Haslett considering taking time away, just feeling like he's a little bit too old. I don't know what that is. That's just what I've heard. They don't know who the head coach will be next year.
I don't know if that bothers me.
I didn't know if it would or not, Reed. I'm just telling you, it's what I heard. So,
and I got thrown out of the DC Beer Snake section because I was wearing my Sea Dragon stuff. So I'm a Sea Dragon fan. John, do you not know this story?
I don't think I heard. Was this the original XFL beer?
No. I went to the playoff game. I went to the Sea Dragons playoff game.
Oh my goodness!
I was forcibly removed by security from the DC Beer Snake section.
Because you were wearing Seattle gear?
Yeah, yeah. They said for your own safety, we need to have you leave.
Oh my god.
Evan lived through this with me on the recap.
I did. I do remember that. Oh yes. Oh, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Evan was not amused. I had my ticket stub and everything else. Anyway, I think we did good work today. Like I said, I think the plan is Rick, who's been on a lot of these. I think Rick and I might do a little bit more focused, like thing next week on the show. I do like, I like both sides of this, kind of the knee-jerk stuff. And then I'm working on some USFL stuff and everything else. Jason Hussey and I will be back on Monday. We're doing our CFL Week 2 recap, and then I will be back with Pat Ruffino. What did we say? Publicly hated, privately idolized Pat Ruffino and myself here. We'll be doing our USFL Week 10 recap, and then but like and subscribe. We'll have our regular show next week. If you're new here, this was kind of the weird one today, late. All that. Evan, anything you want to plug before you get out of here? I know you're working on your Roughnecks thing and everything else.
Yep, expect a couple articles from me out on News Hub shortly related to the draft. And there was a couple of free agent signings as well that I'm going to touch on there for Houston. So expect that coming up hopefully by tomorrow. But yeah, other than that, it'll be interesting to see again, the progression, like I said before, the showcases over the summer. And, we only get to do so many of these drafts. So now I'm already itching for the one in September or October, whenever they're going to do it.
Yeah, I think we have two more of these. I think there's like the fall one or the fall one and the supplemental one. Coach Craig, anything else from you?
Oh, nothing too much. You can follow me on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport. You can follow my YouTube page at Coach Craig Sports. USFL DFS video went up for today for week number 10. Got some MLB DFS going up on the daily as well. So if people want to check that out, feel free to do so.
John, anything from you? I know you have your new big project and you mentioned it briefly, but anything else about that before we get out of here?
Yeah, it's just going to be, if you want to learn about scouting, it's going to be huge for you. So I will announce, I haven't made this public yet, so I'll let you guys know. Mark Orsak, former Steelers scouts, coming on next week. We're going to sit down. We're going to talk about, a lot of really deep scouting type stuff. Really excited for that. Really excited for that vision. And yeah, keep up with all the stuff that I do on at Draft Vogel is the best way to do it, because there's just too many avenues that I have right now to sit here and list them all and at the end of this live stream. So
John's killing it. I appreciate everyone's patience on here. I had a lot of hurry up with the stream. What do you want me to do? We were on, I think, about 2 minutes after the list was live. I appreciate that, John. Everything else, we'll see you guys next time. Everyone have a good weekend. Take care.